somebody to tell me if, well, I'm broadcasting and everything's working all right. So as always, I kind of like you guys to just chime in and say, hey, things are working or not. So, and I will do my best to also check the Twitch chat whenever I can, whenever possible. I don't know, every 5 or 10 minutes. What I'm doing here again is making a cyclorama. I know this is like now maybe a little bit old for you guys, but just really quick, you know, very basic cylinder. This cyclorama can also be called an infinity wall. Sort of the same idea because you are basically trying to get rid of the floor and the line where the floor and the wall meets, which is like this edge loop right here. This guy, right? So this edge loop is what we're trying to blend or get rid of. Don't forget to delete your roof. I know a few of you guys kept the roof intact. No. Get rid of the roof. It's going to create a bad shadow. So here I have a cyclorama, but wait, we're not done yet because this inside is black, meaning that the normals are facing the wrong direction. The shaded view, the normals are facing outward, obviously. So if we rendered the outside of this, we'd be fine. But we want to render the inside, so let's just go ahead and go to Mesh Display, Reverse. Oops, make sure the object is selected. It's got to be green, Mesh Display, Reverse. And now I'm almost there. I just scale this out. I like to move the pivot point here. I hold down D to move the pivot point, and then V for vertex snapping. And I'm actually going to snap the pivot to the center of my cyclorama, or at least down here, you know, and then that way when I scale it, it's going to scale out. So are you guys with me? Can I check the chat and see that you guys, yes, you're here. Cool. Awesome. Good. All right. So scale out the cyclorama. Let's make sure we don't see any kind of black background. So the idea here is we're just giving ourselves a really simple environment. We hit the 3 button and we have kind of a stage or infinity wall or cyclorama. I know some people like to do this with a cube. I mean, yeah, I guess. I personally don't think it works as well. It's personal preference. But if you really want to use a cube, as long as you don't have that line and it works as a stage, I guess you could do that. I just don't like it personally. Okay, so now we have a stage. For today's demo, we're not going to do anything particularly complicated with the modeling. I mean, I might bring in the rig from the last demo just so we have something a little bit more complicated than, primitives, which I'm currently just using primitives for right now. Excuse me. So, okay. Why to repeat the tool? Let's make this cone. So I just have some basic primitives here. I know it's nothing fancy. I'll probably end up using character rig in a minute, but let's just start with this. Just keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Kiss. So why do we keep it simple with this stuff? Especially it's because if we're testing materials and lighting, there's no reason to test materials and lighting with a complicated scene. If you're trying to make a shader or a material, or in this case, I'm experimenting with Toon shading, there's no point in doing it with a very complicated scene when you can do it with just some primitives, and then you can actually move the material or shader into a new scene. You can export the material or shader as a Maya file or as an MA file. And if you do that, then your materials can be moved around. So you could develop your materials in one Maya file and then just simply move those materials elsewhere. All right. Now, one thing I'm kind of a stickler about is using a render camera, which I have here. Would like to name it render camera. So I'll say view, select camera, render cam. And of course, as we've discussed earlier, we don't want the render camera to move, so we can lock it. And I just learned today that they added this nifty lock feature. All this time I've been going over here and just right-clicking lock, but hey, that's even faster, right? Lock, unlock, easy. Okay, so now the render camera is locked and we can kind of start this process. So, Toon shading is really, really, really easy. But I want to start out first by talking about the, whoops, that's what happens when you hit the 3 button. I want to start out by talking about what drives a Toon shader or what drives a Toon shader, and how to make one from scratch really quick. So these are flat, I repeat, flat materials, much like a cartoon is flat, or if you want to think of something like South Park would be kind of an example of this. And anytime we want something that does not, I repeat, is not affected by a light, we can use the surface shader. That's just this black surface shader here. And this means that it will not be affected by any 3D lights in the scene. Now, for a Toon shader, this is something you may or may not want to use. It's just kind of a question of whether or not you want the lighting in the scene to affect your cell shading. Now, with the surface shader, we have out color. And this is going to be just like a flat color. So if you ever need to do something that's just flat, completely flat, this is how you do it. And again, it's not affected by 3D lights. It's not affected by any lighting, ever. From here, we can go to out color. We can go to our option box. And this is the secret sauce here, our color ramp, right? And then we have a color ramp in here. Immediately, we can see how the ramp is mapped to our shader ball preview, right? So then from here, we can, whoops, go back to that. From here, we can not only change the color, there we go. Not only can we change the color, so if I have like, I click on the circle here and I can change this to, I don't know, something else. Let's do blue, right? And then that's blue. And if we wanted to do red on this side, I could select the circle, by the way, and make it red. And then, you know, we have this nice ramp that goes from blue to red, and we can move these points around. Now, what's also cool here is we can click anywhere inside the ramp and make another color. So in this way, you know, we can play around with stuff and make some interesting, crazy effects just with our ramp. Different kind of multicolor gradients. Now, where we see type here, this is going to be how it's mapped. So you could switch from U to V, or diagonal, or radial, or whatnot. I do want to mention that we also have in here UV ramp. So if you have nice UVs, that might be an option too. So there's all kinds of different things you could try. There's even a weird tartan ramp. Wow, it looks like a tartan square. I guess that's the point. So play with these. Have some fun with it, you know. And that's kind of the thing. Try to have fun when you're doing this stuff, guys. Like, it's not supposed to be torture. Interpolation none, that is the key to making Toon shaders. So if you turn the interpolation off, right, this is linear interpolation is the fade. That's how we're blending between colors. If we turn the interpolation to none, then look, we already have something that kind of looks like what you might see, you know, in a Toon in Borderlands, right? You guys ever play Borderlands? Anybody know what I'm talking about? The game Borderlands? Anybody play it? Anybody have an opinion on it? Am I talking to myself again? I don't know. Let's check the chat. I don't know. Let's see. Do we have any gamers? Borderland? Yes, love Borderlands. See, I knew somebody. Somebody knew what I was talking about. So in Borderlands, they have a lot of Toon shading. They have a lot of cell shading. And like I said, that's basically the idea today, is to go over the basics of the cell shading stuff. A little strange. If I assign the material, I should probably see it in the viewport, especially when I hit the 6 button. Hold on. Already seeing some weird stuff here. There's no light in the scene. If there's no light in the scene, Arnold isn't going to want to render it. This is one of the few times I would say use Maya software. And look at that. So when we use Maya software, and again, for realistic rendering in Maya, for a PBR workflow or physical-based rendering workflow, this will never give you a photoreal render. So the only time you'd want to use Maya software, specifically, I think, anyway, is for Toon shading. Now you're probably thinking, but I like my Arnold rendering window. I like my interactive renderer. it's not like you can't use the interactive renderer. I mean, you can also make an Arnold. Oh, look at that. It is actually working in Arnold. And it's working in Arnold without a light, which is surprising. But this might be the difference between the two rendering windows. This is definitely a much newer rendering window. But hey, if we can use the interactivity, then why not? Because that's always fun. So anyway, you can play with your ramp, and you can actually see how this interactively changes over here. You can actually also see how we're getting some interesting bounce light, because Arnold, again, physical-based rendering. And the sphere is actually technically passing through the cyclorama. So let's raise it up a little bit. And obviously, as I raise it, I'm not getting the bounce light. The bounce light's, by the way, created from... it's created from the fact that anytime you use Arnold, it's going to do its best to emulate real-world or physical-based rendering attributes. And bounce light is a key feature of the way that light works in the real world. Since we are not worried about that for Toon shading, we really, like I keep saying, can kind of throw out our physical-based renderer. We can throw out Arnold in this case and go back to our software renderer. Maybe somebody out there is saying, but I want my interactive renderer. Yeah. I know. I like interactive rendering too. So what do we do about this? We actually have this IPR button, which IPR stands for Interactive Photorealistic Renderer. It's the same thing that's in the new rendering window by default, but look, it's still here in the old renderer too. It was in the old renderer first. You just have to remember to draw a box around what you want to render interactively. And look, you have a stop and start button over here too. So now with IPR on, and again, that's this, there's even an IPR refresh here. So I typically try to, stop. Hit the escape button. I said stop. All right. So by tapping the escape button a few times, it usually will stop the render, assuming that it's a relatively simple render. Definitely that can get confusing for more complicated stuff. But for this, just draw a box around what you want to see updated. Click the IPR button, or actually click the IPR button first, and then draw a box. But yeah, the point is that it's going to update, interact in the same way, right? So if I change my, at least it's supposed to. Yep, it's working, right? Now I'm getting updating happening. Okay, so there you go. You do have an interactive renderer with your Toon shading. It works. It may not be as fancy as the one on the Arnold shelf, but it does work. So if you want to have that interactivity. All right, so there's your basic ramp. This is, again, how do I explain this? This is, again, something that is not affected by 3D lighting. And I should also mention something that's broken in the Maya software renderer is the 3 button. So look at the cyclorama. I have the 3 button on, but it's not showing up in the render. So I just want you guys to understand this, that the 3 button, I repeat, does not work in the software renderer. So what do we do if the 3 button doesn't work? We can force the issue by just simply poly smoothing. So click the poly smooth button, maybe even more than once, or turn the divisions up. That's another way to do it. Like that. And you can see I get 4 times the polygons per division. But see, now I have that nice smooth effect. And when I re-render this, even in the software renderer, because it's true geometry, then I'll get rid of that line between the floor and the wall, which has become kind of a pet peeve of mine. I'm really hoping that this demo doesn't get flagged for the background soft jazz, but I don't know. Hopefully not. I'm sure some students would not be happy about that. All right, so back to Toon shading and cell shading. So that's kind of the brute force way of doing it. I frankly don't know why the 6 button isn't showing such a simple thing, but whatever. Let's just keep moving. We used to have a Toon shelf in Maya. It's no longer here, which is unfortunate because it used to be a shelf, so it used to be very easy to get to the Toon stuff on the shelf. But they've changed it. So we have to instead go to our rendering module. And in our rendering module, there's the Toon menu. It's right here. And by the way, you can tear off the menus by simply clicking on the double line. That tears off the menu, like so. Now, let's start doing it through some of our presets, which of course, you know, presets give us a kind of a shortcut to where we're going. So let's do this. Let's do it. Fill, right? That's kind of like what I was just doing with the ramp shader. Solid color would be the same as kind of like the surface material here, just flat black. All right. So solid color, boom. And then look, oh, it's exactly the same as a surface shader. So you can already see exact same thing that I just went over, but here's where it gets interesting. If I go to one of these two-tone shaders, so now I have what? I have the ramp, the exact ramp that you just saw. So now let's look at, let's click IPR, and there it is. There's our ramp. As you can see here, draw a box around it because we want it to interactively render. And then after drawing a box around it, we change the color because why not? Have some fun, right? I don't know. You guys want any kind of particular colors with a theme, maybe? I don't know. Change one to yellow and change one to green. We'll say. I don't know. Spitballing, right? But there you go. And then, of course, because it's a ramp, you can change these guys to be whatever you want, and you should see it update here. It works pretty well. And if you're one of those people that's like, no, I want more than two, right? Then you can, of course, click anywhere in the ramp to create a third one or as many as you want. So that's totally your call. I mean, I don't know. I think that weird stripes don't necessarily work that well, but again, it's a stylistic decision. And this is all about stylized rendering. So it's kind of just whatever you want to have fun with. These can sometimes be affected by lights too. I want to warn you about that. So, and if you use specifically the presets here, like these guys, then you'll get the additional attributes of transparency and incandescence. Incandescence is like, it's kind of like emission, but not really. Self-illumination is what I like to call it. Incandescence is like something that's self-illuminated. Traditionally, we would use incandescence for something like a TV screen or a monitor or anything that had a slight glow to it, maybe an iPad. I think a student did an iPad this term. So that's kind of where incandescence would come in. And you could play with this other stuff like specularity and reflectivity and other stuff. So that it can get pretty advanced. But let's not worry about that stuff. Let's just stick with this for right now. The bottom box, by the way, if you haven't figured out, is the X. So that lets you, of course, delete colors. Yeah, let's keep going. So we can get, there obviously quite a few presets here. The one that says brightness, I did mention a second ago that we can get these Toon shaders to work with with lights rather. So if we use the shaded brightness two-tone or three-tone, then this should be light reactive. Or I guess I kind of have to test this by putting a light in the scene, logically. So, you can already see, look, see? I put a light in the scene and it immediately changed. I have a directional light right now in the scene. Now, hopefully you know at this point, directional lights are usually a sun or a moon, but we can also just use them kind of for fun, in this case, to drive the ramp. So I've got targeting on right now, but if I hit Q, then the directional light is just without a target, but it is still pointing in a particular direction. As I rotate the directional light, then you're going to see, as I rotate the directional light, you can actually see the shader ball, well, literally a sphere in this case, will update. Are you guys tired of primitives? Should I jump to something like a little more interesting, like a character rig, maybe? I don't know. How do you feel about this? Or are you okay with primitives? What's the consensus here? Do we want a more interesting model, or should I just keep plugging away at primitives? Again, if you get your shader working here with a primitive, then you can always just export this to another scene and apply it right to whatever other scene you're working on. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but in your hypershade, you can take any one of these guys and go to File, Export. And in that way, you can export a Maya file. I think it's MB, or actually, I think you get the option. It could be MB or MA. Oh, God, shoot. Yeah, you can do MA, or I always prefer MA. But just save an MA file at this point that is that shader. You can bring it into another scene. How do you guys feel about this? Do I keep going with primitives? Fine with the primitives. Okay, cool. No problem. All right, so this is a bit nicer, this preset, because again, it is light reactive. If you go with the surface shader, these surface shaders are great because sometimes you don't want your 3D light to have an effect. And so if that's the case, like if you're, for example, rendering with a background plate should always use a surface shader. Or if you're simply wanting the object to not react with a 3D light, then yeah, that's how you do it. You use a surface shader. However, some of these presets, notably the brightness presets, actually are connected to the light. And so you can see that here as I rotate the directional light, we're going to see obvious updates. So it's basically a question of, do you want your stylized rendering to work with lights? Then yeah, definitely use these presets, specifically the ones that say brightness. If you don't want the lights in the scene to have an effect, then stick with the surface shader, which is going to be the solid color or the light angle two-tone. Let's keep going with this. There's a cool like rim light thing too. Let's try that on another primitive. Let's do it on the cone. Rim light. Now the cone has this, but I need to draw a box around it to see it update. And there it is. And since we covered rim lighting, like literally in the last demo, it's kind of cool to see rim lighting in our stylized rendering as part of the shader, as part of the material. In fact, they're using incandescence specifically to make the rim light, which is kind of cool. I don't know if I mentioned last time in class, but rim lights sometimes can be light blue. It produces a nice effect. And then maybe you might want to make something warmer for the main shading, perhaps. And don't forget we have two of these. So I'll make this guy, I don't know, orange or red or something. Right? Now, in this case, my rim light is not doing much against that yellow, but of course I can change these ramps to see if I get any kind of difference. In this case, oh yeah, I'm starting to get some red over here. It's kind of interesting that it takes me to almost slam the ramp all the way to the edge here before I start to see some red, but there it is. I don't know if that's a function of the geometry needing to be rotated or if it's a lighting thing. I think in this case it's a lighting thing, so watch. Let's try it, see if I'm right about this. So now I've got half red and half yellow, but you can see I only see yellow here. Again, consider this a lighting thing. If I rotate my directional light, are we going to see more red? I don't know. Let's find out. I really hope this doesn't get yanked for jazz copyright. Okay, well, it does look like this is not attached to the light in this case, because I don't really see any change. Yeah. So again, the difference between a fill shader that's literally marked brightness, meaning that it's attached to a light, and the rim light in this case is what? It's in the shader. So if you wanted the rim light to do more work, you would go to the shader and you would find, oh, there's my rim light, and I can do this. And I should see, let's see, I should see more rim light, hopefully. What are you doing, Maya? Please don't crash on me. I don't have time for crashing. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but interactive rendering. Oh, we got a crash. Woo. Oh, man. Blah. All right, I guess I'll go back to the chat. Oh, back to the chat. Back to the chat. Oof. All right, while Maya is launching here, I guess I should mention that the interactive renderer, both of them, by the way, can be unstable, as you just saw. So I love interactive rendering, but it is a bit of a risk that you have to take. So just be aware that any interactive rendering, even if it's the one on the Arnold shelf, will still crash, and it will still crash because of interactive rendering. So if you really want to make sure that your renderer in Maya doesn't just simply crash, use render region instead of interactive rendering. All right. I don't know if I'm going to make that cyclorama again. I just don't think it's necessary. Sorry. Let's go back to just doing this with simple primitives. Donut. Sure. No, it's a torus. No, it's a donut. No, it's a torus. No, it's the same damn thing, right? Same thing. What are you doing? Oh. So in your input stack here, you can definitely change the stuff, right? You can change your radius and your section radius. So if we do this, there we go. Now we get our nice donut. So you can see how this works. And you can also interactively do it. Donut, right. Okay, let's go back to making Toon shading stuff. So as I mentioned, it's not a bad idea to go to your rendering module, to go to your Toon menu, and to use this. Let's try to speed this up because this is actually a lot. So we've got a bunch of fill presets that we can use. And as you can kind of guess, oh, hey, I'm seeing it in the viewport. That's useful. Thanks. And you can actually see how the Toon shading changes depending on the angle. So in this case, the shader is actually directly connected to the angle of the camera. So as I rotate the camera around, you can actually see how the Toon shading changes. Now, with like any, how do I put this? With any Toon shading thing, typically we don't want just a fill, but we actually want, stop, escape. Sorry, I'm so used to rendering with Arnold that it's rendering with a Maya software renderer almost feels like wrong. But yeah, so the Maya software renderer should always show you the Toon shading. But again, here's that problem, right? We see the chunkiness here. Why? Because the software renderer does not respect the 3 button. Doesn't do anything, doesn't make a difference. So we have to, again, brute force this by using polysmooth. And if we polysmooth it, then we'll get what we're looking for, right? Now we get something smoother. Okay, this is starting to look cool. Go to your attributes. Of course, that's Control A, and go all the way to the end here to your shader. And oh yeah, there's my ramp again. Right? And then we can of course change this to be, I don't know, whatever you want. Maybe green and dark green. I don't know. Whatever you guys, whatever floats your boat. Okay, so we'll save this image. And render region, of course, is when you draw a box and then click the second icon, the render region icon. And that's actually a lot more stable than your interactive renderer. I know, interactive renderer is 100 times better and cooler and blah, blah, blah. But would you rather have your scene crash all the time? I mean, for me, I kind of would just rather stick with render region and not have to worry about that. I mean, it's just one extra click. Oh, God. Anyway, so moving on. One thing that makes Toon shading, oftentimes Toon shading, is not just the cell shading or ramp shader. It's still looking a little chunky to me. So again, poly smooth, right? Like that. And so if it's, how do I know this? Because look, if you zoom in, you can actually see it's still a little chunky down there. And I'm that guy. I really don't like to see low poly stuff because it's 2020 and there's really no good reason unless your art director tells you, hey, you got to have it under a certain poly count. So if your art director says it's got to be 200 polygons or something, then of course you're going to have low poly stuff. If you're developing a game for an iPhone or just phones in general, then your stuff's going to be a lot lower polygon. Okay, I don't care about that in this case. All right, so now what? What do we do now? Well, part of what makes toon shading is an outline. So, if we select the object, we go to our toon menu, you're going to notice that we have assign outline, right? So we click add new toon outline, and that does exactly that. It makes an outline around the profile of the object. Please note, by the way, that this is a Paint Effects outline. And so because it's a Paint Effects outline, it works like Paint Effects. We do have line width. So if you want a nice thick line, you've got this line width slider. Gives a really nice thick outline. And we've got other stuff you can play with, but really for right now, let's just sort of leave it at that. And if we render this right now, actually one thing we can change is maybe the color. Because that's the thing. If we render this right now, this black line is just what? It's going to just get lost against a black background. So yes, you can change the color of the outline here. Check it out, guys. If you're rendering in the Maya software renderer, which is typically a terrible thing to render in this particular case, it's not, because one thing that the Maya software renderer will do, hey, I'm saying something nice about the Maya software renderer. Not only does it handle toon shading very well, as you can see here, but it also handles paint effects. So if you were wondering, do I have to convert paint effects to polygons every freaking time? Guess what? You don't. You actually don't. That's one nice thing about the Maya software renderer, is that when paint effects was invented way back in like Maya version 1.5 or 2, yeah, I'm that old, and yeah, I've been using it that long, and yeah, that's when they developed it. Really, it's kind of crazy, but yeah, Paint Effects has been around that long, which is hard to believe, but yes, it's one of Maya's older features. So if you go to Get Brush under Generate, so I go to my modeling module, I go to Generate, I go to Get Brush. I'm sorry, guys, I'm tired of primitives. I can't do it anymore. So we can go to Plants, right? And we can, I don't know, make a rubber tree plant thing or something. Let's just do it. Where am I going to find this? Oh, we have Toon right here. This is kind of leading into what I was going to talk about, so that's cool. Object mesh, right? So in object mesh, we have light bulbs and chess pieces and all kinds of stuff. But one of the things we have, no, I'm still looking for that. I want that rubber plant. Like, where is it? There it is, rubber plant. Okay, rubber potted plant. So double click it, and then we can paint down a plant. There it is, or several of them. Let's make the brush bigger. Hold down B, left click drag, make the brush bigger. That's too big. I don't know if I ever mentioned this before, but the brush size with Paint Effects is very sensitive. I feel like I've said that before, but just be aware that holding down B and left click drag is going to really be sensitive. So moving on. All right. So the nice thing about the software renderer is we don't, I repeat, don't have to, if we don't want to, convert it to polygons. So look, with my lights, do we need lights? Yeah, we probably need lights in this case. Fine. Make it light. That's okay. So I'm just got a spotlight on here. I'm going to target, T for target. Move the spotlight up. Move it out here. By the way, guys, I teach these two sections back to back. So sometimes, I mean, I generally cover the same material in every class. But if you want to look at the other class, like Twitch video, you might find I do a little bit more in one class versus the other, even though I try to cover about the same stuff. I'm only human, so I don't always get exactly all the same material. So like the last class, I used a different rig, which I kind of like the second rig more than the first, but you know, it's not a bad idea to check out both sections' Twitch videos in case you're confused and you're not getting what you want out of one of the sections. All right, I'm gonna be a little ballsy here and turn on my interactive rendering, even though I'm a little nervous about this, but it works with lighting and materials. So meaning that as I crank up the intensity of my spotlight, we should see something, but I feel like quadratic decay is just like on these days, no matter what. Wow, this is the software renderer. We shouldn't have to work this hard in the software renderer to see stuff. It's weird. But again, quadratic decay is a thing, and it does force one to really turn up that intensity a lot. Oof, really? Now I'm beginning to doubt myself. I'm like, well, maybe I just convert it to polygons, but it shouldn't matter with the software renderer. Nice thing about the software renderer is it's supposed to just render paint effects, even without a light. So I'm a little bit mystified by that. But I guess we can go ahead and convert it like we normally do. Paint effects to polygons. Okay, now it's true polygons. Now if it doesn't render, I'm going to be super confused. Okay, well, there it is, right? So there's our... Maybe they changed that, but there's our rubber plant, and it's got an okay material on it. It's not great. Let's go ahead and start making some cool Toon shading stuff. So it's just a question of like what you want in terms of your Toon shading. Like maybe you want this guy with the highlight. We were doing like dark green and green, right? So let's continue with that. And look, we also have our interpolation here too. I'll bet this is going to get flagged because I think the music is loud enough. Kind of crappy, but smooth. Not really changing anything. Here I'm like, yeah, try the different. Never mind, it doesn't work. Okay. Render region. Save yourself some time. There it is. It's working. Cool. So render region. Nice. And again, if you're daring, I suppose you could definitely use the IPR, but boy, it's a little risky. But let's try it. So click the IPR button, draw a box around it. But the nice thing now is that I can now move my ramp. See, and as I move my ramp, I can see this update rather nicely. Pretty cool. Okay, so we were talking about outlines. For an outline to really work, you need something besides a black background. Oh, let's do the pot as well. Why? While we're on the subject. So same idea, right? Here, and some of these do come with a, like the dark profile, for example, that already comes with an outline, I think. Pretty sure. Excuse me. So I'm gonna make it brown and beige. Light brownish, orange-ish. Then start with that and make it dark brown, right? See, and then we can play with. Hey, if you can see this in your viewport, then maybe you don't have to have the interactive renderer on. I mean, that's kind of one of those. Oh yeah, that's cool. I like that. As long as you can see it in the viewport, that's even better than the interactive renderer because it's real time. And hey, that's cool. I like that. So now we have this kind of cool Toon shaded plant. Oh, I did miss this middle part. So you can either add the shader you've already created, make a new shader. It's totally up to you. You guys ready to get a little fancy now, or should I continue at this pace, or what? Can we get a little bit fancy? How do you feel? How are you feeling? There we go. Anybody have any input? It crashed for me like 4 times in the last project. The interactive renderer, yeah, it's pretty unstable. So I assume that's what you mean. The interactive renderer. So IPR is here. That is your interactive renderer. Draw a box, right? Around it, you can see it's interactively rendering. There's a stop button over there. But here's the thing, right? Like with interactive rendering, you know, it's unstable. So if you have iterative save on, again, save scene option box, turn on incremental save, then hopefully you'll never lose any work. But it is true that any interactive rendering is definitely unstable. Okay, what else here? I feel like this has a line around it. A little trouble seeing that, but oh, old shaders. I don't see where the line is, but here's the deal. Against a black background, it's really hard to see anything. Back in the day, it used to be that you could go into the camera and go into the environment in the camera, and it's still here, like there's the environment, and just change the color here, right? And that's how it used to be done back in the day, right next to your image plane. But I think they broke it. Oh, well, hey, never mind. It still works. Look at that. And yes, I'm rendering from my perspective, and yes, that's bad, and whatever, it crashed, and I got lazy, so sorry. But if for any kind of a scene that you're not just testing a material on, I would say please, please, please always have a render camera. Just get in the habit of doing that, and it's really never a bad thing. It just takes a few extra clicks, and it's always going to be worth it. So in this case, though, this is me mucking around with shaders, right? And so if I want to export these shaders, I can select the shader, go to File, Export, and export the shader into a more developed scene. All right, anyway, moving on. Outlines, right? So we can say add new outline. It will face the camera. So wherever the outline is, it's going to face the camera. So say add new Toon outline, right? And then we can over here change the outline width or thickness. And then down here we can change the color. But now when we have our, I like render region personally. Now we see that our plant has this really nice outline around it. This looks cool. You need to do that for every object though. See, the center of the plant does not have the outline. So here's something that's kind of interesting. Once you create one, then you should see it appear under assign outline. There it is. So once you've created an outline, it's going to show up here. So then you don't need to just keep doing it over and over again because it's right there. And so if it's just a black outline, you want to keep the exact same thickness. Render region again, guys. Please use render region. I promise it's better. If you're rendering this in Arnold, of course, you have to take the paint effects. These are paint effect strokes. I repeat, they are paint effect strokes. You have to take the paint effect strokes, of course, and modify, convert paint effects to polygons. But that's, again, only if you're working in Arnold. And if you're smart, you're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to work in Arnold because it's always going to be better no matter what, forever and ever, amen. And it's true. That's absolutely true. But, you know, we also like to cut down on our workload and our resources. So if we can get away with doing something faster and quicker and still get the job done, then maybe we don't need to, oh, I don't know, kill an ant with a shotgun, right? So that's a weird metaphor, but the idea is that you don't necessarily have to use a physical base renderer for toon shading. It's just, you know, probably not necessary. Although I will tell you that the best work I've seen is still in Arnold. Arnold has its own ability to create toon shading also, just so you know. Okay, let's just keep going. What about a different outline? I mean, this is cool, but what about a different one? You saw a minute ago when I went to get brush, right? This is where your paint effects live. We also have in here, not under paint effects, well, actually, yes. Paint effects, where did I just saw it a second ago? Toon, right? So if we go to our Toon folder, then we can, this is where it gets cool in my opinion. Then we can actually use these as an outline. We've got a doodle one, right? So then double click doodle. You may have to drag it on there. I don't know. I'm not sure. You want to draw it down. But that might appear here. We have to assign paint effects to Toon lines. That's how it's done. Sorry. Click this. Assign paint effects brush. So as long as you have that paint effects brush selected, and again, you have to select it, right? So puffy line, that should be selected. I'm double clicking it. So then now we'll say assign paint effects to Toon lines. Yeah, it changed, right? And then now we should see a different outline, I hope. Been a little while since I've done this, but yeah, if I zoom in, let's see if it worked. Oh, I said zoom. Yeah, see, now we're getting different outline shapes. So this is something cool to play with for stylization purposes. Like you might want to just see, like, what's this one look like? It's green spikes, blue glow streaks. What's this? So double click it, right? And then again, assign paint effects brush. Whoa, it's crazy. Now, this looks like something that may be a black background. Yeah, it looks like something that a black background would probably show up better. So again, go to view, select camera, go change your background color, maybe gray, maybe, I don't know. Just because if we want to see these crazy spikes. Yeah, there we go. You're like weird icicle things. But yeah, this is where you can have some fun. I know that for a lot of this class, it's been maybe a bit of a slog because it's always about realism, 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 all the time realism. Well, no, not anymore. Now you can have some fun with some stylized rendering. Of course, I'm going to ask you to apply this idea to your other projects. You didn't see that one coming. But yeah, and we can play with these. So like doodle line, go to doodle line, double click it, assign paint effects. And as long as you can get back to the attributes of this, stroke, no, hold on. Q for select, just click the outline. See, when I click just the outline, then again, I can go in here, change the color, and make our squiggly stuff more squiggly. There's all kinds of things we can mess with in here. And of course, line weight, because a larger line weight not only increases the thickness of it, but if you have something that's especially squiggly, hopefully we'll see the squiggles more. Yeah. Squiggly. Really squiggly. Is this making sense to you guys? Are you having fun yet? Are you ready to do some stylized rendering? Make sense? Yeah, yes, I assume that's yes to my question. Okay. All right. Where are we? Oh, we're running out of time. Okay, so anyway, I think that this is really cool for making really cool stylized strokes and rendering, but I'm not done yet, right? So, puffy line. There's so much more. So, don't forget, once you have these outlines, they're here, assign outline. What does a puffy line one look like? It looks like this. Wow, that's super cool. Super cool. All right, so where are we going to go from here? Because I am running out of time at this point. How can we make this even more interesting than what it is now? Well, this is the basics. So what I've covered in this demo, basically everything you need to know to customize your own stylized rendering any way you want. But a lot of the strength in Maya does come in things like these presets, like that you see specifically in the generate menu, get brush. This what we call this. It used to be called the visor. It's now called the content browser, and this has a lot of canned effects. So actually, ultimately, any of these paint effects can be added to the stroke, and you can create some interesting effects. For example, I mean, you've got oil. Right, so you could actually even stroke your objects with oil paint, if that's not interesting enough for you. Or, I don't know, all kinds of stuff. So any of these paint effects things can be applied as strokes, like spackle, whatever you want. I mean, it does get to be a little absurd. But I mean, if you wanted to outline your entire thing with feathers, you could do that, which again sounds kind of absurd, but you can totally do that. So, I mean, Toon makes the most sense for what we're doing right now. But like I said, any of these paint effects should, I repeat, should. Let's go to pastels, because I mean, why not? If you double click it, again, the idea is, let's go to black. You should be able to attach that paint effects, right? So assign paint effects to the lines. I mean, you may have to select them and then assign paint effects. Oh, see, totally worked, right? Now we get something crazy over here, but let's see how it renders. So render region, you don't always have to use render region, but I like it. I prefer it. Whoa, pastel, man. Colored pastel. Make it green or yellow or something. Light green, light, very light green, maybe. Whoa. Wow. Okay, so obviously I want to go in here and tweak some of these effects, but you're getting the idea. You can actually make pastel edges. Pretty cool. So in here in the paint effects Toon shape is where you'd get not only the color, but also the line width. So if you didn't want the pastel to be quite so large. And somewhere in here should be that black, yep, crease color. So you could, if you wanted to, just use your color picker or pick the same color or something close. And then what do we get now? There's still something black in here, obviously, because we're getting this black on the outside. So border lines maybe, or intersection lines, open these all up, make sure that they're all green, you know, just in case. Oh, well, this is grayed out. So if it's grayed out, then we can assume that we don't need to worry about it. Cool, finally. Now I got my green pastel, right? Anyway, you could do this for hours and hours and hours, having fun with all these different stylized effects that you can create, thereby creating something that's not realistic or non-PBR, not physical-based rendering, but rather toon shading, cell shading. And we've got all of our entire library of paint effects to play with, which is just sort of a huge amount of fun because there is just a huge amount in there. Pastels, oil, whoa, confetti. I mean, there's just so much. Oils, if you're more into oil textures. I mean, there's so much liquid. I'm not going to go through all these, but you know, you can have fun with any of these. So, and it does get a little absurd, but I would like you to keep this stuff not too absurd. So even though you can do these really fun, weird things, there's a lot of weird, fun stuff in here. At some point, it does feel like it's going way over the top. Let's try finger paint. It's kind of interesting. So double click it, and that kind of loads the brush. Then make sure the stroke is selected here again, and then click Assign Paint Effects, right? And then at that point, you can go back in here and play with these settings. But let's see what we get now. How much time do I have? Oh, okay, I got to speed up this next part. All right, but you're getting the idea, right? You can take any paint effects paint effects, literally, and assign that effects to the stroke that you put around your object. If you want this to render in Arnold, again, you can take, just like the plan itself, you can take the stroke and go to modify, where were we? Modify convert paint effects to polygons right here. So if you wanted to render this in Arnold, you still could. You would just have to make sure to convert all your paint effects to polygons. You already know that from earlier in the class, so that should be no surprise, right? Okay, now let's start to do some, because I only have 10 minutes left, so let's do something, last thing, something a little bit more complicated. Back in your generate menu and your modeling module, go to Get Brush, right? Then from here, again, where our paint effects live, we actually have an entire, not in paint effects, but we actually have an entire folder. Where are you? Lighting and rendering. So in lighting and rendering, we have a Toon folder, And all this stuff is already made for you. So like if you want a pencil sketching effect, there it is. It's right there. Or streaked lines, or watercolor, or any Toon, glowing edges on your Toon. There's so many different things to choose from. It's pretty cool. So one thing I have to warn, yeah, I really like the halftone dots. This is a little bit hard to control, but it's pretty awesome when you get the hang of it. I just have to like warn you about this. These come with geometry, so it becomes a little bit of a trick where like, okay, I don't really want this lamp. I just want the shader. If I move this into my scene or I load it, you can see I get the lamp. And for a demo, that's fine. I mean, there's the lamp, but you may not want this lamp in your scene. So all you really want is the material. So if you go back to your hypershade, get out of the render, go back to your hypershade here. That's not the hypershade, that's the content browser. Sorry. You go back to your hypershade. What you're really after here are the materials that just got generated. See? So whenever you use one of these presets in the content browser, one of these Toon presets, not only does it generate some kind of geometry, it also generates a camera, and it generates all these as well. So then you may find yourself kind of exporting the material out to your scene, again with file export, right? But since I got rid of my rubber plant, the other thing is it comes with a camera. If it comes with a camera, look through it, because you never know. You might find that the camera actually has some settings attached to it, and you just don't know that until you render from it. Because I've found in the past that I'll render and be like, this looks nothing like it's supposed to, and it's because there are settings actually in the camera that you might not know about. Okay, so again, Arnold renderer, not what I wanted, so switch to the software renderer. And now we should see our lovely teapot, right? So this is a good example of what I mean. If I were to render through my perspective camera, it would not have this background. So please be aware that if it comes with a camera, there's probably a reason for that, and you should probably use it. It might even come with some notes. Like this guy actually has notes. And the notes say, description, see attribute, editor, notes. Haha, that's funny. A note that says, look at your notes. That's funny. But yeah, there's your note window down here. So that's what they're referring to. There are, in some cases, notes that get written down here. All right. I'm almost out of time. So play with the stuff. Have some fun. Don't be afraid of using an older renderer. Let's just do this pencil shading thing because I think it's cool. I don't know. I like the crystals too, but let's do this. All right. See, so again, it generated the teapot. Anybody know why a teapot? Like, what is it about teapot? Oh, and it generated a light. See? Now, the real question is, do we get a camera? We go to panel. See, we didn't get a camera in this case. So that's a little weird. In this case, I almost expected one, but it's apparently not giving me a camera. It's a little strange. But let's see what happens. Remember, with a directional light, the only thing with a directional light, 5 for shaded, 6 for texture, 7 for lighting. So if we turn the directional light around, rotate it specifically, we can get different results, right? So let's see what this looks like. But yeah, anybody know why a teapot? Like, is there any special significance behind a teapot? Anybody know? Damn you, Arnold. Stop. Okay. Hey, look, it actually exited out of the render like it was supposed to. Nobody knows why a teapot. Why are teapots a thing? Who cares? Why is it? Why are teapots such a thing in 3D? Does anybody know? Let me go to the chat window and see. No. Okay, yes, ready for style. Finally, some stylized stuff. I know, you've been waiting the whole term to finally get to the point where you can not care about realism, throw realism out the window, and just make cool stylized stuff. So you finally get to do it. We're finally at that point. The answer about the teapot, in case anybody cares, is that the teapot was the first convoluted 3D surface, meaning that, like, up until now, sorry, excuse me, when 3D graphics were first coming into their own in the late 80s and early 90s, the teapot was considered the first complex object. And so for that reason, it's used oftentimes to test out things like materials and lighting. And more to the point, it over time actually became a primitive. So if you're using 3D Studio Max, your teapot is actually a primitive. So it's kind of a joke in the 3D community. When you see a teapot, it's like, oh, yeah, there's the primitive freaking teapot again, you know? So it just becomes kind of a joke. But yeah, looks pretty cool. Looks like a hand-drawn teapot. There you go, right? And we're almost out of time. So, last thing I wanna really make. I'm gonna fake the audience out, right? I really want this to feel like it's hand-drawn. Like there's no question that this is absolutely not CGI at all, right? So what do? We take the render out, especially if it's black on white. This works especially well. We go into Photoshop or your compositing package of choice. I don't know, maybe you're into GIMP or something. Remember that there is an online version of Photoshop called Photopea. That's PHOTOPEA, like P like Princess and the Pea, or peas that you eat, or you know what I mean, PEA. So Photopea, again spelled PHOTOPEA.com, is a online, and you know what? It's for some reason logged me out. I don't know why. So I guess I get to actually demonstrate this. Oh, nope. Now it's launching. What are you doing? Whatever. I'm going to just do it. We were just talking about it. Oh, there's that. Yeah, there's a reason. There's a reason. It's not just because teapots are cool. There's always a reason. Okay, so photopea.com. See, my Photoshop wasn't working because I apparently logged myself out or something, or just crashed really bad. I don't know, but hey, look, it's an online Photoshop. Photoshop built in your browser. Look at that. I don't even care. So there is my paper, and so I just have some random paper that I downloaded, and then I take the image that I just saved out, teapot IFF. It doesn't like the IFF file. It's not really a big deal. We'll just save it out as something else. So save it out as like, I don't know, a BMP or a TIFF. Try not to use JPEG, really. It's the worst for, I don't know. It's like the expression garbage in, garbage out. Everybody wants to use JPEGs, but TIFF and Targa, even PNG is actually superior. Maybe bigger files, but more data. JPEGs are compressed. So back to my original point, garbage in, garbage out. So if you're starting with JPEGs, oftentimes you're just not going to have as high quality as, say, if you had this TIFF, right? So now I take the TIFF and I copy it, Control A, Control C, or maybe just, is this docked in the browser? Is that what's happening here? Well, Control A, Control C. So hopefully my shortcuts work. Yes, they do. So now my teapot is on my paper. Oh no, not that shortcut. Not all my shortcuts work, apparently. Damn, that's annoying. So transform is what we want. I made my teapot a little small. Whoops. And then once I've done that, change the blending mode from normal to multiply. I drew that teapot. Obviously drew it. You can tell. You can tell I hand drew that thing clearly, right? And so if we want to duplicate this guy, because it's in multiply mode, every time that we duplicate it, it's going to multiply it and make it that much darker. And there's your hand-drawn teapot. There's your stylized demo. Are you guys good with this? Are you cool with it? Am I on time? Yeah, look at that for a change. So how do you guys feel about this? Does it make sense? You like the Photopea thing? Does anybody care? One way or the other. All my homies hate JPEG. Yeah, exactly. I used to... Got it. Cool. I used to have a T-shirt that said "Real artists use" or "Real computer graphics artists use TIFF." It's super cheeseball, but yeah, TIFF is a beloved format that works very, very well and has a lot of data in it, and is what we consider a lossless format, meaning that it has no compression, or not as much compression as, say, a JPEG. So lossless formats are always better. Use lossless formats, guys. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. If you can, use a TIFF, use a Targa. Hell, even a BMP file is better than JPEG. So just get away from those JPEGs. They're okay in some cases. I know you're going to download them for textures, but just try not to use them. If you don't have to, then don't use them. All right, that's enough of me ranting and raving about file formats. I'm going to stop.